Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our council meeting. It's April 11th, 2022. This meeting is open to the public and is available through online platform. First thing we need to do is a motion to suspend the rules of procedure for the starting time. Have the clerk read the recommendation, please.
Council suspend the rules of procedures and begin the April 11th, 2022 regular council meeting at 5:00 p.m.
That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And today we have a moment of silence. Before we begin the meeting tonight, let us take a moment of silence to honor former Wilmot Councillor William Bill Weichel, who passed away peacefully on March the 31st. In 1988, Bill was elected to the Wilmot Township and Waterloo Regional Councils as Wilmot's Councillor at Large. In the 9 years in that role, Bill served on numerous municipal committees and on the boards of the Grand River Conservation Authority, Ontario Traffic Conference, and Wilfrid Laurier University. Bill had a lifelong passion for education and public service. He was a mentor to generations of students and took great satisfaction from their life achievements. My sincerest condolences to Bill's family and friends. Our flags have been lowered at half-mast today in honor of Bill. Thank you. And I'll ask Councillor Hallman to read the Territorial Acknowledgement, please.
It was very beautiful for that tribute. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the settlers arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. There are no additions to the agenda. Adoption of the agenda. The clerk read the recommendation, please.
That the agenda as presented for April 11th, 2022 be adopted.
Moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Minutes of the previous meeting. Have the clerk read the recommendation, please.
That the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. Regular council meeting, March 28th, 2022.
Thank you. And that is moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There are no public meetings, no presentations. We have one item on the consent agenda. Ask the clerk to read the recommendation, please.
That report number ILS 2022-14 be received for information.
Thank you. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gordick. Comments, questions? All in favor? Oh, Cheryl. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, just a really quick one. I've already spoken to Ms. Middleholtz, but just for clarification with regards to the report. The report actually states April the 7th, 2021. And I asked the question as to why it would take a year for us to see this. Maybe perhaps it was a typing error, but I spoke to Ms. Middleholtz and she clarified that part of the process for this one did take a year. So I was just more making a comment with regards to the public, wondering why it would take over a year for us to look at this boundary line. So I just wanted to make that comment and appreciated Ms. Middleholtz reaching out to me to explain that. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is proposed designation of portion of the former Livingston Flax Mill property. Ms. Middleholtz.
Yes, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Following the March 15th, 2022 meeting of the Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee, I received correspondence containing the committee's recommendation for beginning designation under the Ontario Heritage Act for a portion of the property that was the former Livingston Flax Mill. If council decides to declare their intention to designate the property, staff will undertake the necessary notice requirements to the property owner, the general public, and the Ontario Heritage Trust, an organization whose focus is to conserve, value, and share the places and landscapes, objects, traditions, and stories that embody Ontario's heritage. Within and attached to the report are the details of the property from both a planning and heritage perspective. There are 2 registered delegations to comment on the report. Marg Rowell and Yvonne Sima are in attendance from the Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee. Stuart Snyder and Edward Oldfield are in attendance to represent the property owner. To respond to questions of a technical nature, Mr. Okrafka is available to respond to planning and development questions. Ms. Locke is available to respond to heritage and committee process questions, and I can respond to questions concerning the heritage designation process going forward. We welcome any questions council may have following the delegation. Thank you. Mayor Armstrong, you are muted, sir. I'm not in council chambers yet. It seems that I have to remind that every once in a while still.
Well, you're living up to your job description. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Anyway, before commencing with hearing from delegations, I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Delegations will be allotted 7 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or delegations. Derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others. Hate speech or defamatory comments. I will now call upon the delegations, and we'll start with Marg Rowell and Yvonne Zim. Welcome, ladies. You have your 7 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Armstrong, members of council and staff. My name is Marg Rowell, and as Vice Chair of the Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee, I'm here this evening on behalf of the committee to provide an overview of the former Livingston Mill property by summarizing the importance of these structures with the recommendation for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. To provide some background, the former Livingston Mill property is comprised of a series or group of buildings. Looking at this photo captured with Google Street View, you can see the Baden Feed Supply Store at the right. Also the steeple from St. James Lutheran Church. I don't see it in this. There we are. Thank you. St. James Lutheran Church, also known as Sir Adam Beck's Church, that Heritage Wilmot proposed for designation and council endorsed as having historical, contextual, and physical value to Baden for over 155 years in 2019. On the left-hand side, you can see part of the complex of mill buildings, and finally looking down the center of the street, you can see the yellow circle highlighting the proposed concrete silos and associated structures proposed to be demolished, which is the focus of my presentation. To provide clarity and distinction about designated and non-designated properties under the Ontario Heritage Act, I will provide some background information for you so that you understand the committee's role and decisions that were made at the committee level. Next slide, please. To best understand the role of Heritage Wilmot with respect to heritage properties, whether they are proposed by the committee to be designated or non-designated, it is important to know why the committee selects and seeks approval from council. To provide a quick background, the committee is guided by the Ontario Heritage Act. Every municipality is required to establish a heritage register that reflects designated properties, ones you see with brass plaques on them, and properties that are non-designated that Heritage Wilmot believes is of heritage value. By including these properties on the register, it flags them as being important to the municipality. It also triggers additional reviews should a demolition be proposed, which often will require additional study requirements if development is proposed on site or adjacent. Next slide. The Municipal Heritage Register is a growing document that Heritage Wilmot identifies, evaluates, and recommends properties to council that are deemed to be of cultural heritage value or interest to the Township of Wilmot. These properties are referred to as non-designated, which is what the Livingston Mill property is currently classified as. Each year, Heritage Wilmot presents new properties to council for consideration, and this is done to provide accessible information to the public about cultural heritage. By doing so, it recognizes specific properties of cultural heritage value in Wilmot Township. This in turn promotes knowledge and enhances the understanding of the township's cultural heritage. Also, with an endorsement of the register, it demonstrates council commitment to conserving the heritage resources. And last, it is used as a planning document that is consulted by municipal decision makers when reviewing development proposals or permit applications. Next slide, please. Livingston Mill is included on the non-designated register. This complex of buildings were researched and assessed in 2014 by Heritage Wilmot and were deemed worthy of adding to the Township of Wilmot's Heritage Register and non-designated properties. The recommendation was brought forward to council in the form of a presentation and was endorsed by council at the January 12, 2015 meeting and officially added to the register. This property has been included on this list for about 7 years now, with the most recent register approval on September the 27th, 2021. On this slide, you can see the first page of the Heritage Register from 2021 at the top, and then the larger image at the bottom relates to the Livingston Mill, and the details associated with it can be found on page 3 of the Heritage Register. Heritage Wilmot has noted in the description that these series of buildings are directly related to the operation of James Livingston Flax business that manufactured linseed oil in Baden in their historical association. Next slide, please. The mill area is rich in industrial history that begins in 1864. The top left photo is a snapshot of the early beginning of the operation. Below is the layout of the series of buildings that I spoke of earlier to provide further insight of the operation that will dominate the production in North America with its headquarters in Baden. The ad to the right is from 1917 and speaks to the Livingston Flax product being known around the world. Quoting the ad, Great Britain, Africa, France, Newfoundland, Holland, Belgium, and West Indies all know Livingston brand product. Our long experience is reflected in every order filled from the Livingston plants in Baden and Montreal. This area will become the center of the town of Baden with the Township Hall, Fire Department, baseball field, and gathering space for the community, and 2 churches that were both designated by Heritage Wilmot within the past 5 years. And the next one. Here's, here you can see some ads showcasing the linseed oil mill, putting Baden on the map internationally. And the next one. Again, some early photos of the mill area. And the next slide. Back to present day, because this property is included on the non-designated heritage register, when the application for the demolition was received by Development Services, the Planning Department, it triggers a process where Heritage Wilmot is required to be circulated in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. The committee would have a 60-day period to discuss and decide whether the noted property reflects cultural heritage value or interest to the Township of Wilmot. If so, Heritage Wilmot would recommend that the property be considered for designation under Part 4 to Council. Doing so would void the demolition application. The committee met on March 15th, 2022, and a motion was passed to proceed with the designation of the Livingston Flax Mill property. 7 members were in favor and 2 members opposed the motion. Next slide. Some additional photos of the property today. Notice the original rail line in the photo on the left-hand side. Linseed oil would have been transported through North America by train starting here. And the next slide. What is designation? It is a way of publicly acknowledging a property's value to a community. It helps to ensure the conservation of these important places for the benefit and enjoyment of present and future generations. It is a legal process outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act, created to preserve the unique heritage of our province. Designation registers a property as a historically significant property, is a way for property owner to display pride in their property. A designation protects and preserves Canada's heritage. And the next slide. Criteria for designation. The property meets all 3 criteria for designation for historical and associated value. The building proposed for demolition relate directly to the J&J Livingston Dominion Linseed Oil Company of Canada.
One minute, Mark.
Okay. Business magnate and flax mill king of Canada, James Livingston, put the town of Baden and Wilmot Township on the map internationally for over 8 decades. The operation is also connected to this residence, Castle Kilbride, which became a National Historic Site in 1995 by the Historic Sites and Monument Boards of Canada. In addition, over the years, many people worked in this mill, and they and their family remember the contributions the linseed oil factory made to the community. Contextual value. The property is both physically and historically linked to its surroundings, representing early industrial history for Wilmot Township. It is an important feature in maintaining the character of Baden's 19th century infrastructure and industrial development. Physical value, representative of early industrial architecture, and tells a story for the community. Physically within the height of the silos and buildings, they are the most prominent structure in this area. For these reasons, Heritage Wilmot passed a motion March 15th, 2022 that can be seen at the bottom, that the Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee recommend to Wilmot Council that the clerk and director curator proceed with the designation process of the unaddressed property known as 88 Charles Street and 76 Mill Street in Baden in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act.
That's your time, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
So our next delegation is Stuart Snyder and Edward Oldfield.
Sorry for the delay. It seems to be a little bit. Oh, Mr. Snyder was in there. Sorry.
Welcome, Ted.
Good afternoon, or good evening as it might be now. And
And
Mr.
Stuart.
is with us, I believe, by phone.
He is. Yeah.
I'm here too, Ted. Go ahead first, please.
Firstly, Mayor and Council, thank you for hearing us this evening. I realize that heritage is not an easy thing to define. There are obvious heritage things like Castle Kilbride or my own law office, which is decades older than Castle Kilbride. It's harder when we get to these situations, and I respectfully have to disagree with some of the comments made about the physical, contextual, and historical relevance of this building. We first of all have to figure out what is it we are designating. There is a series of 12 slender silos, concrete silos, that do go back to the era of the Livingston creations. It has been added on to with concrete and structures that probably go up to the 1960s or 70s and were abandoned by master feeds and sold off as being surplus and no longer useful to their agriculture feed milling situation. Part of heritage is to figure out what to do with these buildings. After all, we're not in the business of creating brownfield development by structuring or designating items that have no function. The old structures, which are part of the Livingston situation, are about 16 feet across, I would estimate from seeing them. They're conical towers with hopper bins. They're not like that great big structure in St. Jacobs where it's a big enough silo that's been usable. In this case, if you punched a hole in it, you'd have such a small room you couldn't do anything, and you can't connect them because they're all circular. The rest of the structure is not part of the Livingston situation. It would appear to have been put on later by feed companies. And as a result, we need to be careful what we're talking about. And I would suggest at the most, what one could describe as historical is that series of bins, the ones that are painted white as we see in the pictures. But even there are limitations put on to, do they fit the requirements of the regulation? Mr. Snyder's company, West Ag, bought this structure in 2014. And at the time, his lawyer doing the real estate work did not note any historical designations because I gather none were present at the time. The purpose at this point, because it is not proven useful agriculturally, will be to demolish and seek most probably residential outcome for the site. It's that or a derelict building because it has no other purpose. It's not like Castle Kilbride that is well repurposed for the community. I note from the Cultural Heritage Forum that this is not a unanimous situation with regard to does it fit everything. I note on that evaluation form, it says the type of property is the Livingston Flax Mill, now Baden Feed and Supply. Mr. Snyder's company is not Baden Feed and Supply. It appears there's a mix-up of some sort, and the notice when this was sent on the original list didn't get to Mr. Snyder at all. The physical layout, again, there are silos throughout the township. This is perhaps a different one, but it is a concrete set of silos. It's not something that's built of wood or built of old staves back to the pioneer days. And again, I'm not certain exactly what is being done or proposed to be developed, but assuming it is going to the 1800s structures of the Livingston plant only, based on the submissions heard earlier, even there we end up in situations where, as is noted by the recorder contextually, it doesn't contribute to continuity or character. It doesn't provide a physical, historical, functional, or visual link to its surroundings. There are downsides throughout. It is not a complete structure. The alterations, most importantly for integrity, it does not retain most of its materials that were original, as noted there is checked off as a no. It is not a notable structure due to sympathetic alterations that have taken place because, of course, Master Feeds and other companies developed what they wanted for modern and now outdated feed production or milling production, and it's noted as not being in good condition. I would suggest that while certainly the township's cultural heritage form follows Ontario Regulation 1006, which is the criteria at some level, I suggest it does not meet having a theme or pattern on Ontario's history, does not have the potential to yield information contributing to understanding history. It doesn't have aesthetic, visual, or contextual importance to the province. It does not meet, in my view, those criteria. And I would ask you to conclude that in this case, while these are always hard decisions, I'm not suggesting they're easy decisions, but the Cultural Heritage Committee has done its job, and it's now up for time for decision to be made by council. And obviously, I'm not permitted to go on to the length that I might otherwise go, but I suggest that this is not a situation where the historical, contextual, or physical attributes of that structure justify designation, especially when a great deal of it is not back to the Livingston days. It is a structure that is run out of use. And again, as I noted earlier, designating this particular structure will simply lead to it being a brownfield situation for many years to come. Now, Mr. Snyder, I believe, would like to have a couple of minutes at the end to outline his personal side. So I'll end my submissions here. As I see, I've done about 5.5 minutes.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. I am opposed to this designation of this property that I own under West Ag Resources, consisting of all those list of lots that we have of no municipal address, otherwise known as the old master feed silos. Personally, I'm against it, corporately against it, and as a taxpayer of Wilmot Township, I am totally against the designation. At the January 9th, 21 meeting of the Heritage Society, I noticed that they were planning on saying that the Ontario Heritage Act was going to be changing their rules, that they had to notify property owners when a property was put on the list. That's interesting because their comments, quoting from that article, was saying that stated that Wilmot has been following this policy for over 20 years and has been seen as a trailblazer in the heritage community. Well, I purchased the property in 2014, which is less than the 20 years, and I haven't, to this date, I have yet to have a notice from the Wilmot Heritage Society. Other comment, the materials presented to you as councillors in the handouts that I saw printed on the screen prior to for the meeting, there's a lot of information in those that are not pertaining to my facility. I guess I'll have to ask the same question again. What are we really presenting? What are we planning to designate? And I'm not sure exactly what is going on. The entire property, a few silos, part of the silos, the rail line, whatever. I think we need to totally to clarify that. I know that
You've reached your time, Stuart.
Okay. I guess then to follow up, I'll say at the very end, I agree with Ted feeling that comfortable that there's a lot of it is not Livingston. Totally in summary, I guess I will say again, I do have a sentimental spot for history. You can talk to anybody that knows me, but it needs a function and it needs a purpose. And at this point, I don't think this facility can have a purpose to carry on and further on. One other quick comment, I want to commend the council for putting up with me on this. And I guess one other comment for the Wilmot Township in general, Elaine Bender, as a receptionist in the township office, I don't think the township will ever find a nicer person to communicate with anybody when they call in to ask for direction of anything. She has been a tremendous asset to Wilmot Township. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Stuart. I certainly couldn't cut you off with all that praise. So thank you again. So there is a recommendation. I'll ask the clerk to read the recommendation, please.
That council consider the recommendation from Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee concerning designation of a portion of the property known as the former Livingston Flax Mill property, Baden being Plan 627 lots 165 to 168, 173, 174, Part Lot 169, part of Charles Street, Plan 633, Lot 5, RP 58R 6700, part of Part 1, Township of Wilmot, as a property of historical and architectural significance under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990, as amended.
Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Fisher. Councillor Gordick. Comments or questions from council? Councillor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. I'm seeing, am I correct that Mr. Snyder is still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I have a few things here, but before Mr. Snyder goes, I wanted to ask one thing. Mr. Snyder, should, depending on the direction that Wilmot Council takes us this evening, one thing that I didn't find clarification from you or your lawyer or in the staff report is, should council be interested in certain aspects, or the Heritage Committee of certain aspects of this building that can be harvested before a demolition would occur? Would you be willing to work with everybody on that?
I see no reason why I wouldn't. I guess I feel strongly about Wilmot Township, and no problems. I'll work with anybody on it.
Okay, so just to be clear, so if there was unique pieces, that would be something that we could continue a conversation with. I think that was clear. Okay, so that is my only question for Mr. Snyder. The rest I have for staff. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything for Mr. Snyder before I continue. No, okay. So I had the opportunity to visit the site, and one of the toolkits that I found was called the Heritage Property Evaluation, and I found that at the mtcgov.on.ca, and I found this to be a very useful tool when I was visiting the site myself. And one of the things that going through this is it was asked, it kind of gives you ideas to evaluate what are similar things in the area that bring heritage values. So what I'd like clarification from staff on is when I look at this site versus the site that's directly across the street that has like the corbelling, the arches, and the windows, I didn't see this at this specific site, but the report does mention that. Can I get clarification if there's anything on this specific site that has those characteristics in it?
It's three. I can answer. So this would be sort of what we call like the newer part of that large piece complex of properties. Would be a little bit different, but still, when the committee was choosing and selecting on the heritage cultural value of it, it still is piece. We call it like piece of a puzzle, or at the meeting, someone mentioned it's like a keystone in a door. You need one piece for the other, and it's still part of it, but newer, but still as significant.
So, okay, sorry, I'm gonna have to ask for another clarification piece. So like where it was identified with the corbelling and those pieces, just from when I was there yesterday, I didn't see that on this specific spot that's asking for the demolition. Is there, did I miss it, or is it on that specific site where the demolition is being requested?
I can, if Marg is still on, she, Marg was one of the recorders for that. She can speak in detail to that if she's still here. Carla, is she still online? Yeah. So the corbelling wouldn't be related to specific to this one, because the way they did the assessment was the whole property. And I can look specific to when they did the description, but it was more of the complex, but not specific to what you're mentioning on that part. There's Mark.
Oh, no, there's no corbelling on the specific buildings that we're looking at, the silos. There's none of that.
Okay, that's very helpful information for me as well. One of the other things that when I'm looking at the heritage property evaluation that I did, just trying to walk the path, was, so when I'm looking at as well with the train that was described as being an interesting piece. So if my understanding is that if I'm looking at the property that's being requested for demolition versus if I continue down to that other property that has the corbelling and has more of those things, can someone specify for me in history what the difference was? Because when I'm looking, it looks like more of activity would have occurred at the other building than at the building with the silos that we're discussing right now. Can someone create a distinction on the history value of that for me?
Mark, did you want to speak to that, or? Mark, you're welcome to jump in. So again, the one that's deemed for demolition, that would be sort of the later one. So originally when the rail came through, the one on the south side for sure would be the early for the train coming and loading up. The one that we're talking about specifically would be secondary to that. But you are right, it would be older on the other side.
Okay, that is also helpful. I'm just going to look. Okay, so the other piece so I think Mr. Snyder's lawyer addressed this too, because I was kind of evaluating this. So when I'm looking at the building, I was seeing like a lot of exposed rebar, and I only know a little bit of this knowledge as I am married to a mason. And so when I look at exposed rebar and I'm seeing chunks of concrete fall off, it was looking like it didn't, my perception is I'm concerned about the actual safety. So I'm not sure if the Director of Development Services can comment on this or how that looks, but it looked like it is derelict. Like there's not much that if we designate this, I was perceiving like it could, it just going to have, this will happen more versus the investment that would have to be to preserve or peel back what is actually of historical significance possibly inside. Could you comment on that?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I think what I can comment on that is that designation doesn't mean that the property is going to be fixed up and reused as is. And I think that's what the solicitor for Mr. Snyder indicated, that it'll probably end up being a brownfield site that'll be derelict. I would suggest the New Dundee Creamery as probably the closest example to it, where again, an old structure certainly with value in that community, but became derelict over the years. So simply designating does not ensure protection of the property. It stops demolition from occurring, but the components that you're referring to would probably still remain in place. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's important not to marry the two components together, that designation instantly means that the property is going to be fixed up and restored as per what the applicant had indicated.
Right, so that's helpful. Can I ask you another question while you're still on there? So then when I was asking Mr. Snyder about, sorry, I'm taking airtime, everybody. I just go through my questions. So when I had asked about like him being willing to have a relationship with us, should demolition go through, and being able to have pieces. So what I'm imagining is when I was on site yesterday and I saw that the concrete, modern concrete from, I guess like the 50s or 60s, looking at the age of the rebar was there. So if that were to come off, how would that work with permitting or that kind of thing to harvest some of that material that would have been relevant to kind of preserve and keep? Is that something, can you walk me through that process if that's a possibility?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I can walk you through our process, but the harvesting, as you referred to it, would be up to Heritage Wilmot in terms of, or, not my department per se, in terms of what should be harvested and how. Our department requires an engineered demolition plan for this site, given its significant height, proximity to the street, proximity to neighboring houses. It would be a very controlled demolition. It's not as simple as just putting the loader against it and pushing it all over. It's going to have to be done in stages, and it's going to have to be designed by an engineer to ensure that only the things that are coming down are. We don't want any unintended consequences of neighboring properties being damaged. So that part we would deal with. In terms of the specific components that you felt should be saved, or that Heritage Wilmot, I think what Mr. Snyder indicated is he prepared to talk to whoever is interested in that, and through that, then they would work with the engineer who's designing the demolition to ensure that those components are saved. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's sort of a two-step. Is our department simply deals with the demolition and ensures it complies to the requirements of the code.
Okay, no, that was very helpful. Thank you. Okay, I've got I think for everybody, let me having that airtime to get all the answers I needed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holman. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, just a couple comments. In regards to what we're being asked for today, basically what we're being asked is to determine if this is a property of historical and architectural significance. I think that's kind of a key thing to keep in mind when we're voting on this today. So we're not asking who, if we kept it as a historical buildings, who's paying for anything, or what's it going to be. None of that's going to matter. Is it historically and architecturally significant in our mind? I know I've sat on the Heritage Committee now for 3 years, and I'm pretty amazed with the level of talent that sit at this committee. I know Marg and Patty have been in the Waterloo Heritage Society, and we got a lot of local historians. And for 7 people to vote yes and 2 no is pretty significant too. And I know I had asked Al during the meeting, Al Junker, how unique is this? And he said very unique. The only place he could think of that's similar would be St. Jacobs, where they have silos right in town and the tracks coming in and things like that. And I know St. Jacobs, they've done a wonderful job in repurposing. And anyway, the other thing too, I keep thinking about all the buildings that have been taken down over the years. So I made a small list, starting over Foundry Street, the Foundry building to start off with, the blacksmith shop, the molding shop, 4 tanks for various purposes, and the Dominion Linseed office. Behind the actual mill, there's an engine room, boiler room, and a bunch of other tanks. And then in between the silos and the actual Baden feed store, a couple of warehouses. That is a lot of buildings to come down. And every time a building comes down, to me, a piece of history goes with it. My thinking, anyway. And I think Livingstons were very prominent in town. At one point, we had over 100 people working in the mill. And I don't know, I think we should really consider making this a heritage property. Just, I don't know, to me, it's architecturally and historically relevant. Just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you. Yeah, it's a hard one, when we're looking at buildings that have come down and pieces of history that have been lost. And I share Councillor Fisher's feelings that, when we lose buildings, we lose a piece of history, we lose a piece of heritage. At the same time, what do we do with this? And what is Mr. Snyder to do with this? For me, it's challenging to, we have one listing that identifies features that are contained on 3 separately owned properties. And I think we need to disambiguate it. We need to create separate listings for the properties. They shouldn't be, they can be, talked about as having significance to each other, but particularly in the, where we're looking at Mr. Snyder right now here talking about one block of silos, but the vast majority of the information on the listing actually is south of his property, south of the road, and on our non-designated register, it's kind of one block, and it was assessed as one property, which at one point it was. That being said, those buildings have come down beside it. And I see that the clerk has her hand up, so perhaps she's wanting to interject something, so I'll pause my comments.
Ms. Middleholt.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Far be it from me to interrupt you, Councillor Fenning. However, I just wanted to provide some clarification. So what council has been asked to vote on in the recommendation is the consideration of the designation of the legal description that is contained within the resolution, and that is very specifically this one property. The 3 roll numbers that are represented on the list of non-designated heritage properties. It's not the other 2, just this one. What would be sent to the Ontario Heritage Trust, what would be part of the notification is the description of silos and attached buildings at the former Livingston Mill property. So that is the statement of architectural value that accompanies the document. So that is what would be sent, what would be attached to this. So if that provides any clarification to you, this was supplied to me from Heritage Wilmot. And so that's what was included, and that's what would be forwarded. And I'm, of course, just speaking from a process point of view on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. That helps clarify. So for me, when I look at the site, the property, the buildings south of the road, south of the block we're talking about, absolutely, I would like to get in touch with the owner, have a meeting, tour the site, create a comprehensive list of key features that are currently existing and their historical relevance. And the other piece about that is that there's a block of silos with associated elevator structure contained in that site. So it is contextually complete. Whereas this block that we're talking about is no longer contextually complete. It has all of the buildings that we've seen in some of the heritage photos that were associated with it are gone. They have been demolished. And when we're looking at a feature that's unique, the style is preserved in the block across the road. So for me, balancing wanting to preserve heritage piece with also wanting to ensure that we don't have derelict sites and things that are not serving the community, but make space for something that we really desperately need. To me, that addresses that balance. And I would like to see us, begin the process of designating the complex to the south of the road as soon as possible. But I'm not in favor of designating this specific standalone piece, because I don't believe that I don't see that it qualifies. And I am very much convinced that Mr. Snyder will allow us to take some pieces. I am very grateful that he allowed us to tour the site, and I took a lot of pictures and I had a really enjoyable time. But it is very clear to me that this is a building that it would be extremely difficult to repurpose in any way. Structurally, it is questionable perhaps as to its soundness. I'm not an engineer, but I have a little bit of familiarity with agricultural buildings, and I would have some serious concerns if that were on my farm. For that reason, I really don't think that we should proceed with designating this particular block. I would really, really love to engage in the conversation about moving forward with designating the complex south of the road. And I think that we should undertake that. But that's not on the table tonight.
Ms. Middleholtz, did you want to add something before I continue?
Just only briefly, and with regards to Councillor Fenning's comments, for the conversation about the, shall we say, the building from the south of Charles there, that is something that council can provide some direction to Heritage Wilmot for them to undertake as the advisory committee, to undertake those conversations with that property owner and provide some of that engagement piece that you are talking about. And that is completely separate from necessarily what we're talking about today. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. Councillor Fenning kind of more eloquently summarized what I was trying to get across before as well, and I echo her comments. When I look at, again, that document that I compared, we have basically replica structures across the street, and that entire building holds more relevance with so many layers, and a lot of the items that were identified in this report actually address that block. So, and just being near it when I was touring yesterday, I think is an imperative, and I support Councillor Fenning's comments about sending messages back to Heritage Wilmot that I think time is of the essence. We're looking at a derelict building right now that I have a lot of questions and concerns about, and if it's designated, it will just continue to crumble because there's no other purpose. Where that building across the street, I look at and I admire what Kitchener and Waterloo have done with a lot of their heritage buildings, and they caught it in time to designate and then work with the property owner and find, and you look, we see Google and other places that have been able to do that and preserve its history with being able to be repurposed. I don't see that on the property in question. So I don't know how you'd like to handle that, Ms. Middleholtz, but I support that idea of going quickly as possible with the one across the street before, as Councillor Fisher had identified, before we have another property of historical significance, but it is left with no other opportunity but, you know, faced with the council today with a challenging decision. So I would support that.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick. Councillor Gordick.
To you, Mayor Armstrong. Contrary to public opinion, because I was a little on the anti-bridge commentary because of, for me, the safety aspect of the iron and stuff. So I went and visited the site yesterday as well. And I understand Councillor Fisher's comments about history and things coming down. And it happens all the time, unfortunately, yes. But sometimes things come down because they need to come down. And in this particular instance, I think the silo needs to come down for safety. For one of the biggest issues for me is safety. Seeing the crumbling cement or concrete, I'm never sure which word it is to use, falling around the base. There is significant historical buildings across the road, as have we pointed out. There's a beautiful big brass bell that's there, the corbelling on the walls, some arched windows, way more significance there, and of the same period. Part of that, I pulled up that document that Councillor Hallman referenced, and one of the things is if there's anything the same that can be repeated, do we need to keep two things? We don't need to keep two sets of silos that are basically the same. And as pointed out, we don't even know if these silos are from the same period, so they are later. So again, significance to me is not really there. And the other big one we've been having people, the MZO issue came up. And for me, one of the big things is it did highlight that we have an issue with attainable housing, attainable and affordable housing. And leaving these derelict buildings there, who's responsible for them? If Mr. Snyder no longer has this property or sells it, then we're tossing this onto somebody else to maintain it and the safety and making sure that nobody gets hurt. We already know that there's the youth there, and I saw a guy just there yesterday with an ATV running across the field, and what if a piece of concrete falls down on his head? There's a lot of issues for me, but going back to the MZO issue is we're talking about housing, leaving those buildings there for no particular reason that I can see of relevance, except for the building across the street, which I agree with Councillor Fenning and Councillor Hallman. We should look into that, and as a direction to staff, if it's me that asks it to Ms. Middleholtz, direction to staff, yes, have Wilmot Heritage look at those buildings. But we need housing here in Baden, and leaving those buildings there at the cost of perhaps a nice set of homes that could incorporate some of the feeling of the area, to me, is far more responsible as us on council than putting basically a derelict building that will eventually just continue to crumble. For what purpose? And who then becomes responsible for it if Mr. Snyder no longer has that? Is that a taxpayer responsibility to maintain those and keep them safe for the community? So if you can't gather, I'm voting no to have this designated as a heritage piece of property. But I will ask that we ask for the building across the street to be designated, or at least looked at for designation.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yes, I don't see the value in designating this particular location as in the motion as well. I know it's been on the non-designated list for 7 years, and it's good to see that the process is working, that potential demolitions are flagged and people have a chance to comment. And I can understand Heritage's concern with, hey, it's on our non-designated list. We've got 60 days. We should try to save this, and appreciate the efforts in doing so. But I know a couple other things that have changed since then. I mean, the 2015, the regional official plan changed. Obviously, our intensification targets have changed. And a few people have commented on, the role this property could play in helping to intensify some of the urban core around Baden. So you balance all those things off. I think something else to consider is the story of the Livingstons is, I think, been very well preserved and very well told. Not to say that there aren't other buildings connected to the story that would help, or could continue to tell the story. But the Castle Kilbride certainly tells the story of that family and their legacy and the importance of their industries and all those other things to Wilmot as well. So I feel we've certainly told that story historically, made some significant investments in telling that story historically, and that I would also not be in favor of designating this property, but instead seeing the other uses that it could have that are of value to the community today. And appreciate being able to sort of get some pieces out of there that might be important, as Councillor Hallman mentioned as well. But I would not see the usefulness in designating the property as per the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Just quickly, I want to make sure that if a motion is required, we do make that motion tonight to ask the Heritage Committee to undertake conversation with the property owners adjacent to ensure that we don't lose any of the other pieces.
Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So the actual resolution that's before council this evening is not necessarily that the recommendation be endorsed, the recommendation from the committee be endorsed, is that council consider the recommendation, which I would say you have. So depending on how it is that council wishes to proceed from this point, we do have a mover and seconder. I would suggest that somebody make a motion to amend the motion in a manner that you see fit. Based on the conversation that I'm hearing thus far, it sounds like something to the effect of, and that council not proceed with designating the property under the Ontario Heritage Act, and further that Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee be directed to investigate the property, the Livingston Mill property south of Charles Street. something to that effect. It would be my suggestion, as I said, based on the conversation that has occurred to this point.
Thank you. Just to let everybody know, I will be voting on this as well. And a couple of comments I wanted to make is that, I think when we're dealing with heritage, I think it's very important that the property owners be on board. I think that is extremely important, because if they're not on board, then you're not going to get the effects that you're looking for. And another thing, I think when we talk about the property south of the street, I think something to look at is what's happening to the mill in downtown New Hamburg. There's an opportunity that people are taking and creating housing that could occur here as well, and would still preserve the building as it is on the exterior especially, and probably most of the interior. So there are opportunities, and I think there are people out there who are more than willing to take those opportunities and work with them. So those are my comments. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I wondered too, the wording of the recommendation was such that it didn't really express an opinion per se. However, to save a step, I would say failure of the motion means that we're not considering the recommendation, as far as we're not considering it in the sense of moving it forward. We have obviously considered it in the sense of discussing it, but to me it reads, consider the recommendation from Heritage Wilmot concerning designation. We are not considering designating it. So I would say we can just defeat the motion, and then if there's a direction to staff or whatever else we need to do as far as other properties to encourage Heritage Wilmot to look at, to me that's easier than rewriting resolutions. It's just my 2 cents.
I think that was 3 cents, but that's okay. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. I like that suggestion by Councillor Gerber, and I would imagine that, knowing as enthusiastic as the Heritage Committee is, they don't need a whole lot of direction to undertake investigation of the site. But perhaps for the record, a simple motion to that council is requesting that Heritage Wilmot undertake conversations with the current owner of the property south of, what is it, Mill? I know where I'm going. Don't ask me. Charles, thank you. And perhaps, for accuracy, we should include roll numbers to ensure that we're very clearly designating which or identifying which properties we're asking to be investigated. And that, Heritage Wilmot put that on their work plan for the next available opportunity to ensure that we undertake those conversations, explore the site, and come back to council with the designation. And I mean, as far as I understand, the property owner is still happily using said property. So, we obviously are not looking to encourage a business to move out, but hopefully, we can indicate that we would like to work with them so that when he is or they are ready to move on, that there can be a plan in place, and they know that we're there to support moving it in a good direction. Sorry, I went off rambling there, Ms. Middleholtz. I apologize, but hopefully you got what you need for a motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. So I just want 2 clarifications because of how this conversation has gone. First of all, I want to just clarify, because Mr. Schneider may be available. Because of the way that this property has been designated, I want to ensure that from this conversation, as this motion appears to be being defeated, that this will no longer even be a non-designated property. And what is the process then? So I want to ensure that this conversation doesn't come back to us wherever. And then the other part would, when would we be issuing, or could we be issuing a demolition permit to Mr. Snyder based on this conversation? I just want to know the process after. So I'm not sure who would answer that, please, and thank you.
Mr. Okrafka, you have something?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Councillor Gordyke. The process of 60 days ends on the 16th. However, with the resolution of council to not proceed tonight, the demolition permit would be available to be issued tomorrow, with the proviso that we would request Mr. Snyder to reach out to Ms. Locke with respect to any artifact salvage or requests that Heritage Wilmot might have with respect to the subject property. From Mr. Snyder's comments and knowing Mr. Snyder, I don't think that will be an issue, but the chief building official would issue the permit then immediately tomorrow. And my understanding is that process-wise, then at the next update of the Heritage Registry, with these structures removed, the property would then be removed as well. Although from the discussion, my sense is that rather than having 3 properties on one, registry listing, that those would probably be divided into the store listing and then the south side of Charles Street listing. But Ms. Locke may have comments on that as well.
Councillor Fanning?
So I think Ms. Locke had her hand up, and since her comments are probably much more material and mine was just a question, I'd defer to her first.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Locke.
Through you, Mayor, I was just going to agree with Mr. Kropka that yes, the next update for the non-designated heritage list, you would see once the demolition permit is issued, then the committee would be removing that portion of it, and the committee already will be looking at dividing that property into like 2, because it was grouped as one, just for better clarity. So just confirming that it would be removed.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. So my question is whether we should, whether it would be useful to add something about retrieving or empowering staff to retrieve artifacts that are of relevance. I have a few thoughts on particular items. So Ms. Locke, I will happily share my thoughts with you later on some ideas there. But whether that's something that, because I imagine that it will take some work, and as such as perhaps an allocation of resources, do we need to add that to the motion?
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I would just wish to say that I think, the vote we're going to take here in a moment will indicate the direction of this particular identified property. I would say it's unnecessary to craft a further motion expressing any council opinion on the other properties. I think Heritage Wilmot has heard what's happening, and we don't want to get into sort of doing their work for them, nor do we want to sort of set up a situation where a majority of council has already endorsed looking at a property before we actually even get the results back of Heritage Wilmot's work on the property. So I think just a vote on this particular motion, with the understanding, as always, that there's some cooperation to get the artifacts out is all that's needed to process this.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. So I see no further questions or comments. And we have a mover and a seconder. Call the question. All in favor? None? All opposed? Okay, that is defeated. Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. The last thing that I wish to add to my previous comment, which I neglected to do, was just a thank you and appreciation to the work of Heritage Wilmot. I know it's never easy when the opinions aren't necessarily shared by everyone, but we certainly do appreciate all the work that is done and all that is done to place Wilmot at a forefront around the region when it comes to heritage preservation and publicizing the history of our heritage and the work that they do around Heritage Days and on the committee. So Thank you for all the work that you do, and we look forward to seeing your future work despite this evening's result.
Thank you. Yes, we do certainly appreciate the work of Heritage Wilmot. They do, and the heritage that we have, and the work that's been done around the township on different buildings. It's amazing, some of the stuff that's been done, and we appreciate all their help. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I want to echo what Councillor Gerber said about the good work that Heritage Society does. But the other thing too, I was a little confused with the voting, and I never put up my hand for anything. So I'm not sure which I should be opposing the motion or not.
If I'm not
opposing.
mistaken, your lack of vote is a negative vote.
Right. Okay.
For you, Mayor Armstrong.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Technically, because you didn't raise your hand, you abstained, which is fine. It's just you're not counted either being in favor. We didn't do a recorded vote, so no worries with regards to that. But yes, if you were not in favor of the designation, you would have voted against the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fenning.
Just a quick question on procedure and process from the CAO and clerk on whether or not we should proceed with a motion to request the action from the Heritage Committee, and also to absolutely echo the comments that have been made about the Heritage Committee. It is a real pleasure to be on that committee and to be part of the discussions, and I have learned a lot, and I'm really grateful to be part of that committee as well, and to get to learn from all of the really brilliant people that are on it.
Ms. Chambers.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I would concur that I don't believe we need a motion to direct staff to engage in those discussions. I think Mr. Snyder has expressed his willingness, and I know that there are other circumstances in which Heritage Wilmot has worked with developers who are engaging in a demolition on the side. So I think that we can take that on at the staff level and work with Mr. Snyder on that.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is the election governance documents, and that's Ms. Middleholtz again.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. In 2018, the provincial government updated the Municipal Elections Act to introduce one mandatory policy and an optional policy. The mandatory policy was to provide clear rules and guidance for the use of municipal resources during the municipal election. Rather than getting into specifics, I will summarize that the policy ensures a fair and equitable playing field for all candidates in a municipal election and regulates that no candidate may use municipal resources in a manner that differs from the general public. Municipal resources include facilities, properties, staff, equipment, supplies, and township branding. The recount policy is optional, but requires it to be approved by bylaw if implemented. Staff recommend this policy to ensure a clear understanding for all parties when the clerk would conduct a recount when the results are close enough that a tabulation error may have conceivably occurred. The policy further outlines procedures for conducting a recount, regardless of why the recount is being conducted. Both policies outline responsibilities and how they are communicated. At the request of council, staff have provided a summary of the ward boundary review process and what needs to happen when, according to legislation. Beyond the legislation, ward boundary review planning must also consider sufficient community engagement time and the retention of a consultant. The township does not have a policy regarding ward boundary reviews and how frequently they must be conducted, or what catalyst would trigger one. Council may, by resolution, consider directing staff to prepare one for consideration. Both the deputy clerk and myself are available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Middleholtz, I'll have you read the recommendation, please.
Certainly. Oh, just a minute. I lost my paper. There we go. That report, ILS 2022-13, be received for information purposes. That governance policy 22-002 regarding the use of municipal resources during a municipal election be endorsed. And further, that bylaw number 2022-17, a bylaw to adopt a recount policy, be adopted.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. A move by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Gordick, you have a comment?
Just a follow up as to what Ms. Middleholtz said. I would like to ask for direction of staff to prepare a governance policy within the guidelines, and so are within the conversation that Ms. Middleholtz and I had, just put in some parameters if required once the report comes back. Something, for example, depending on if the population increases by a certain percentage, then we have a review slated. But of course, leaving that to the staff to come up with some recommendations to prepare. But yes, I think a direction to staff to do a policy kind of takes it out of the hands of council having to make that decision, not knowing all of the exact information. So I think if we have something that has a schedule to it, or at least an assumed schedule, if we use like a percentage of population, makes us follow a procedure within our strategic planning, and of course with capital spends and things like that, expenditures, so that we're prepared going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I have two questions. First one, what is, in regards to the percentage for recounts, are we going to be doing the same as Woolwich and Wellesley? Are we going to be similar in the 0.25, I believe it is? And also, what are the neighboring communities? What is their area where they use?
Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. To be honest, we've had this policy in place since 2018. So we retained the policy that we used at that time. Unless Ms. Murray has an exact account of what other municipalities have done for the recount policy, I will have to get back to council on that. 0.25 is what we used in the previous election, and what we are continuing to approve. As I said, it's a small enough of a number to account for a potential margin of error. I do believe that from the conversations that I've had with the other clerks, and like I said, it's just been conversation, so I don't have the exact tally of who has done what. There are some that are using a percentage, and there are some that use a defined amount. I believe, as you said, Wellesley and Woolwich, I believe they are using a percentage. North Dumfries has I believe a number. I forget what the number is. It's a small number as well. And they presented one number for members of council and a different number for the mayor. I want to say it's 5 and 10, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'd like to get back to council if I may to provide that information. But I think you'll find that any municipality throughout Ontario that has a recount policy, it'll be it'll be one or the other, but really the numbers are not that different. I got ours from conversations with Peel region.
Okay, and I just had one other question, if I could. Under part 1, item F, campaigning at any township operated events. So if the township is a major sponsor of, say, the Fall Fair, Canada Day, would that be considered a township event?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I think it would depend on the level to which that the township is involved with this. I will leave it to the CEO. She has some other comments. However, what I would say, if I'm going to use the Living Well Festival as an example, I know that it doesn't take place during the election, but we'll use it as an example. There is a township-sponsored barbecue. You would not be able to campaign there. There would be no campaigning at that particular event. So same thing if you're thinking of the Fall Fair, during the portion of the evening that's about Citizen of the Year, certainly that would not be appropriate either. You're in township facilities at that time, so you need to be mindful of that. I do see that the CAO does have their hand up, and would defer to her at this point. She may have some other thoughts on this.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor. You know, I think it's difficult at this time for us to anticipate any, any and all events that may come forward. I would certainly caution council around anything that would have the optics of being municipally sanctioned. So if we support it financially in any way, that I would caution against campaigning at those types of events. Again, the Municipal Act changed the role of the Integrity Commissioner to not only investigate closed meetings, but also to provide advice to municipal councils. And I would urge you that if there's ever a time when you're in doubt, that you would reach out to our Integrity Commissioner to ask for that advice.
Thank you. Councillor Holman.
Thanks for the mayor. I just wanted to share with Councillor Fisher, kind of echo some of the comments that I did reach out to my personal solicitor to get some advice on that, because the intricacies of how that can be. The one thing that I was going to ask staff for was a list of sponsored events during that time that might be helpful for during that time period for anyone who's running. Could be just helpful to have that list to just know when you're wearing what hat at what time.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. I appreciate Barry's question, because in the last election, I think a number of us actually had a booth at the Fall Fair as part of our election campaign. And the Fall Fair was certainly happy to have election booths at the Fall Fair. So that's something definitely I will be looking to clarify.
Okay, thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder, and I see no more questions or comments. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have bylaws. The clerk read the recommendation, please.
That bylaw number 2022-17 be read a first, second, and third time and passed in open council.
Moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There are no notice of motions. Any announcements? Councillor Gordick.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I have two. One kind of goes into each other, but anyway, tomorrow, April 12th, is an anniversary. So April 12th, 1980, Terry Fox dipped his artificial leg in the Atlantic Ocean in St. John's and said, This is the day that it all begins. Over the next 143 days during his Marathon of Hope and every day of the 42 years since then, Terry has united Canadians in a way never seen before. The Wilmot Terry Fox Run will be commemorating this historic occasion by raising a Terry Fox Lives Here flag on Herb Street in St. Agatha, which will fly throughout the week. Thank you to local resident Janet Ott for helping us with this. Caker Maker in New Hamburg recently hosted a cupcake fundraiser, and Martha McClure, the Ontario director of the Terry Fox Foundation, bought 48 cupcakes that she asked us to donate to a local worthy cause. We've chosen the Wilmot Family Resource Center, so we'll be delivering them tomorrow for their clients. Although Tricia might want to count to make sure a couple aren't missing when we get there. Finally, at noon tomorrow, April 12th, we'll be taking the final bids for a commemorative Terry Fox plaque that was donated by John and Kathy Jordan. All proceeds from the auction will be donated to the foundation. Visit wilmotterryfox.ca/auction to place your bids. And last announcement I have is the community players are having an in-person play in May, Murder on the Orient Express. Tickets went on sale this Saturday. I believe today, April the 9th, is the last day to get a discount on those tickets. And then they go to regular price starting tomorrow. And they're going quickly. So if you're interested in going to a great play and watch some great theater, please visit the Facebook page of the Community Players New Hamburg. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fanning.
Thanks for that reminder. I'll certainly be getting my tickets. I don't know if I'll get to it tonight, depending on how late the meeting goes. I wanted to remind everybody that, you know, the volunteer opportunities to support Ukrainian refugees and displaced people are ongoing, and they're still much needed. I had the opportunity this morning through La Via Campesina, which is an international organization that I am part of, to listen to reports from farmers in Ukraine. And, you know, as I'm looking out at my fields and thinking about starting to prepare for planting, those farmers are talking about having to remove mines, unexploded ammunition, and dealing with the theft of their implements and equipment as the Russian army has withdrawn from areas. That's the kind of challenge that those farmers are facing right now. And there's not a lot I can do other than stand in solidarity with them. They're talking about the struggle to support their families, defend their homelands, defend their fields, and defend their farms. And I'm very grateful that that isn't a challenge that I'm facing as a farmer right now. There may be some opportunity to support farms in Ukraine in the future, and I certainly hope that our community will be able to rise to the occasion when that presents itself. But for now, please sign up. The grassroots, WR grassroots response.com, I think it is, or is it .ca? I will share the link again on my social media, but please sign up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a confirmatory bylaw. The clerk read the recommendation, please.
That bylaw number 2022-18 be introduced, read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council.
Thank you. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fanning, all in favor? That is carried. And the next is recommendation to adjourn. Madam Clerk.
That we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor.
Thank you. Moved and seconded by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Fanning, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you.